Check, check, 1, 2. All right. Hello, everybody. For those of you who are in the other room eating pizza or having drinks, you can come to this room and listen to awesome talks. So please come. Hi, welcome to the ComfyUI Meetup. My name is Eric Tang, and I'm one of the co-hosts of this event, along with the amazing ZeroSpace, of course. Look at this beautiful space. Thank you for being here for our September event. This time, we're going to have an amazing speaker, Josh Davis, who will come later. And Shuelong and the ZeroSpace team will be giving another talk about video generation in 3D. For those of you who are new, if this is your first time at the ComfyUI Meetup, can you raise your hand? All right. We have about like 30% of new members. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. If you're sitting next to one of them, please welcome them to the community. ComfyUI is a super friendly, accessible community. We thrive on open source and sharing knowledge. So yeah, you're at the right place. Whether you're just learning about Comfy for the first time and getting confused about all the different node graphs, don't worry, because we're all confused. I'm still confused about the nodes. It's okay. Or if you are if you've been using for a long time, we have a lot of pros in the audience, and so let's share knowledge and learn from each other. So ComfyUI is the world's leading open source creative AI tool. And it started out as at the beginning as a tool to just use Stable Diffusion to generate images, and now it's grown to become kind of a tool that if you are launching a new open source AI model, you want to have day zero support in Comfy, because that's kind of where the community is congregating. And its true power lies in the fact that you can create custom workflows and share them amongst each other. That way you can truly customize how the AI model works and how they behave, and also share with each other. ComfyUI New York started out at the tail end of last year, and we have grown from a little 10-person meetup in the first time at one of my friend's offices to now over 1,000 people on the list. So it's been a tremendous year for us, and of course we won't be here without the amazing sponsors and the co-hosts. So give a hand to our co-host ZeroSpace. So ComfyUI has had a couple of interesting announcements in the last couple of weeks if you've been paying attention. So I want to communicate a little bit of kind of ecosystem updates. One is that if you haven't played with it, definitely go play with WAN Animate. WAN Animate is a new kind of model drop from the WAN 2.2 team that allows you to do really high quality lip sync and kind of character replacement. You just go on X and search for WAN Animate. You find a lot of really awesome demo videos about it. So definitely go check it out. They've also announced Comfy Cloud last week, which has been a pretty which has been a very popular request on that team. So I'm excited to see them working on this new mission and being able to kind of provide enterprise support and and kind of multiplayer modes and all these cool things that people have been asking for a long time. With that being said, I do want to introduce our first speaker, Josh Davis. You may know him from the IBM Watson. He designed the Watson sphere. You may also know him from his permanent installation at the Whitney Museum. We may know him from the music visuals with Kanye and Taylor Swift, which is an interesting mix. But the man, the legend, the man, the myth, the legend, Josh Davis.
Hey, hey, hey. I said Kanye and Taylor Swift because they cancel each other out. You know what I'm saying? So it's bad guy, good gal. Okay, how do I switch this? Who's gonna go? Hey, I have like 152,000 slides, so I think my talk's like 3 hours. You guys are comfortable, right? I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I got about 152 slides to get through, and I'm going to start a little bit in the past so that you can kind of understand kind of the stuff that I'm doing now. So hi, my name is Joshua Davis. I have been creative coding for about 30 years. I went to school out here in Brooklyn at a place called Pratt, and I found computers and Linux like really, really early, and decided fuck paint, and that I was going to paint with computers. And so since 1995, I've been using computers and specifically programming and code to make artwork. So I'm on X, I'm on Instagram. You can check out some of that stuff. And basically what I've been doing is generative programming. And again, I'm going to talk about the past just because it's going to relate to the future. I'm also going to talk really fast. I'm going to say like a lot of shit about ComfyUI. And the hope is that I'm planting seeds in like a couple of you people so that you'll come up and talk to me afterwards, because I want to deep dive on a lot of topics. So I used to write programs that would generate algorithms, and those algorithms would make patterns. And I would use this to make graphic design. So way back in the day, I eventually started using Flash and ActionScript and PostScript. Oh Lord, yeah, where it's the old guys, right? The white beards, like, oh, I love that program. It's all the old dudes. So using Flash and ActionScript way back in the day, and it was great because it was a vector-based environment. You could generate these through PostScript, which meant you could open up an Illustrator, and all of this was editable, and it was really exciting. And eventually, I moved into Java, into working into an environment called processing. There are two versions of processing. There's processing, and then there's processing JS. I want to make the distinction because we're going to cross the line here in a little bit. This stuff is using processing Java. So this is all with Java and using GLSL. And again, like writing software to generate images based on algorithms. And for me, this was really exciting because I never knew what I was going to get, right? Like I would write a program and then I would click generate, and it would generate some kind of pattern. And if I close that program and run it again, I would get a different output. And so I was obsessed with this idea of like, you know, a lot of people open up like, you know, Photoshop or Illustrator or Figma, and they're very intentional about where they pick colors and do things. And I was curious, like, could I actually script all that? Like, could I write a piece of software that said, you know, these were the colors, these were the forms, these were the shapes, and these were the rules about how these things would generate? And so this is actually software that's making this art on screen. So all of this is using processing, the Java version, and outputting this to vectors. And again, it was kind of like every day was like my birthday, because I would write this software and it'd be like, here are your presents, and every time I run the program, I would get something different. And so for me, this was really exciting creating graphic design this way, because I didn't sleep, and I would just stare at a computer for 9,000 hours running a program like 30,000 times to get like, you know, 5 images that were great that would become some album cover, you know. I need help, send help. So again, all of this is done with programming. Eventually, I moved into processing JS, and so this is now using JavaScript, and this because my friend Beeple, who is Mike, hit me up and he's like, hey man, there's this whole NFT thing and people are spending money on NFTs, and I made an astronomical amount of money, which was crazy. Like doing like little NFTs with JavaScript. And so I haven't had to work for a couple of years. It's been a lot of Final Fantasy, folks. A lot of video games, a lot of making art for the past 5 years. Why? Fake internet money. Woohoo! JavaScript. So this is processing JS, similar kind of idea where we're using color and these algorithms to come up with these systems where every time something runs, it generates some kind of pattern. And most of these are just kind of like studies and making them chonky. These are the chonky boys. Figuring out ways to like exploit color. So all of this is done with this idea of employing a system that would randomly generate something, and it would be different or unique every time, but on guardrails, right? So I know it wouldn't venture too far off of the programming that I had initially set up with, right? So these are just some of the outputs from that. Now, I spoke at TED in 2005. My group was called Organic, and I gave a talk for 15 minutes, and half of my talk was on AI. But it wasn't called AI then. It was called machine learning, GANs, neural networks. And so I've got to find this DVD because in 2005, I was talking about the very thing that we're meeting here today to talk about. So it only took you 20 fucking years to catch up. November 16th, 2023, I get this little program running called ComfyUI. And boy, did shit get fun. All right? Who's done this? Everyone's done the little magic bottle, right? And for me, I was like, okay, you know, it's like almost, 20 some odd years later, and it's almost back to the same exact thing where I would write a program and it would generate something unique. And then with Comfy, we've got this idea of random seeds, and the same shit's happening. Like this idea where I can set up a workflow, and every time I run it, I'm going to get a different bottle, right? And so the similarity between how I was writing software, some 30 years ago and what's happening right now is very similar. So it feels like this full circle, for me at least. The fun's back. So it's been about 2 years now that I have just deep dived into playing video games and figuring out ComfyUI. And I know a lot. I know a lot of secrets. So if you want secrets, I definitely know a lot of secrets. So you can see the similarity. This is obviously that programming stuff and processing, and I find so much similarity between that work and how I'm building these things. One thing that I wish he would have said about AI is up until Comfy existed, AI was like trying to hit a target blindfolded in the dark, right? It's like you have a fucking idea and you're just trying to hit the target. And with a lot of programs like Midjourney and DALL-E and all this other stuff, I feel like you're trying to hit a target in the dark. And Comfy says, nope, you can build these like really robust workflows where you can actually hit the target almost every single time. So in terms of it being able to like generate things, it just far exceeds anything currently on the market. So amen to you, Comfy. And then we all did this. Right? So we all tried to figure out, or at least I did, maybe it's my OCD, depending on what kind of seeds do I use and what kind of models do I use and what is my sampler and what are my CFG settings, and I'm building all these tables to figure out how those settings change everything. And this is kind of like the deep dive that I went down to try to figure out how all these different things worked. Don't talk to me about organizing ComfyUI because I am insane. I wish more YouTube videos looked like this, where you could actually, it didn't become like a spaghetti hot mess. But that's a talk for another time, making your ComfyUI pretty, even though no one sees it except for me and whoever downloads my workflows. And we all did this, right? We all like just, even though I have this background in art, like I'm just trying shit. I like motorcycles, I like Akira. I don't know how this is going to relate to my style, so I'm just going to throw a bunch of stuff at a wall and see what sticks. And I'm just trying to figure out how all this stuff works, right? And it even goes far as like how do latents work, and how do latents start in the beginning, and how do they end up refining the noise to make the thing. So I did kind of like a really crazy deep dive on how that stuff all works, and some tricks to actually creating more detail out of things. I know some really crazy ways of doing that. And that's injecting noise. Like there's a way where you can start a process, stop it before it finishes, inject it with noise, and then finish the rest of it off to get more detail. For some of you that made sense. For some of you, like, he's speaking Russian. I don't know what the fuck he just said. That's fine. I wanted to understand this idea of generating low scale to upscale. And so I really deep dive into upscalers and tilers and I ended up trying to figure out how tilers worked, and I made a bunch of mistakes, and some of them were hilarious. I don't know what's happening here, but there's a Josh that really loves this. She has 2 heads, of course she does, and she's melded into a motorcycle. What's better? I'm in love. We're dating. Shut up. Right? Figuring stuff out to the point where I ended up like making my own upscaler. So I kind of wrote my own Magnific because I know how to program, and I've really gotten good at building these workflows. And so I actually built my own sort of upscaler to figure out like how can I start with a low res and how can I get high res, but at a much better quality than maybe Comfy does right out the gate. So that's been super fun to build that. So. Then we do this deep dive into IP adapters and learning how to like style transfer. IP adapter is really great if you have a bunch of content that you've already created and you want to make clones or mimic of that work. And so you can. This is foreshadowing. You can see how this is going to go. Where maybe I want to use IP adapter on my own work, and it's sort of like LoRa without actually using a LoRa. Of course, getting into ControlNet to figure out how poses work and making sure that compositions are adhering to a certain way, so you can sort of deep dive into using control nets, right? To get someplace where it's like only 3 of these photos are real and 2 are fake. This, of course, is a year and a half ago, so you can probably figure out which ones are fake. But this idea of using IP adapter to absorb a style and then use ControlNet to adhere to a pose has been really interesting. So great. So a bunch of us have been trying to figure out, especially from the artistic front, like how do we make AI a tool that we can use, right? And so all of this work up until this point has been like figuring out the tools, and now I'm at this midway point where I got to try to figure out like how do I use this to make Joshua Davis stuff. And so a bunch of my friends were kind of tinkering with AI, and I thought, you know, the best way to do this is to collab. And so I reached out to my buddy Chuck, who was doing some really interesting, he does all this in Photoshop. How, I have no clue, but he's using Photoshop's AI tools. And I said, listen, Chuck, I think I can take some of your stuff and I can start to build some workflows around it where it's stealing composition, style, and color to do some interesting things. And so these are some originals that Chuck did. And I was building this workflow where I was using IP adapter and some other stuff to try to regenerate based on this content that's been sent in as input. And I think on the ComfyUI page, this event, somebody had made the remark about how I had made a comment about no prompts. Most of my work does not have prompts because in ComfyUI you can do clip vision, and clip vision is a way to pass it an image, have it try to think of what it is, and then use that to rebuild the work. So if you look at a lot of my workflow, most of my prompts are completely blank because I'm using clip vision to generate this work. So all of this is using ComfyUI to kind of reimagine some of Chuck's work. And this is trying things like what happens when you use Euler on the left and using LCM on the right. Like how does that change? How do different samplers change this artwork? And this is all LCM as the scheduler. This is going back to Euler. And most of my prompts are empty. But the nice thing about having this kind of clip vision setup is that you can use a prompt to like interject something to guide it. So I think in this I just said glass. So the prompt literally just says glass, and then it's using the clip vision, and then it turns it into this kind of glass look, which has been really exciting. Now, the stuff that you're seeing on your left, those are my processing sketches, and we've actually made a node where you can copy and paste processing code inside of ComfyUI, but that's like a whole other hour-long talk. And the stuff on the right-hand side is ComfyUI interpreting my processing sketches and basically re-rendering them. And so this is a couple of examples of the middle being my processing input, and the ones flanked on the sides is ComfyUI trying to interpret my pieces, right? So these are processing sketches, and these are those processing sketches re-rendered through ComfyUI. Euler on the left and LCM on the right. And so when you have 30 years of work and 30 years of image making and 30 years of like a shit ton of artwork, this whole ComfyUI thing now becomes really fascinating because now I can be plugging in all of this older work through a ComfyUI pipeline. And so these are just like some samples of rendering old processing sketches, but reinterpreted and rendered through ComfyUI. Now, here's the other cool part too, is that you can use masking. Most people don't know this. If you use a mask, if it is white, it will render only on the white, and if it's black, it doesn't render on the black. And any grayscale is kind of like a fade between that stuff. So not only can you pass in an IP adapter of the artwork, but you can also pass in a mask, and it will only paint in that mask, which has been really dope to kind of control things on screen. So I got this system where what happens if I put in 3 different masks and 3 different images, what would happen? And so here, what you can see is happening is I'm loading in 3 processing sketches that I rendered, and then I'm loading in 3 masks, and the masks are grayscale, so they fade out. And so I don't know if you can see, but it will only paint the artwork in this section, word? And so I build like 3 composites, and then I build, again, I don't know if you can see this, but this one down here at the bottom is a composite of all 3 of those put together. And then that gets passed in as not only a latent, but an IP adapter. And so these are all processing sketches that are sort of recomposited inside of Comfy. And then inside of Comfy, I'm taking those processing sketches, and Josh is right back to where he was 30 years ago, which is sitting in front of a computer for 24 hours and not sleeping, and I might be freebasing Red Bull. And I'm just running ComfyUI over and over and over again to get these random generations, which has been awesome. Like, it's just an entirely new way to sort of reimagine the work that I've been making for 30 years, right? Now, obviously, this is abstract. It gets interesting when this is my another one of my buddies that I collaborated with, and taking some of his work to build these like new composites. And yeah, how do I fold in, and again, this work is like 1.5 years old, but how do I fold in imagery in between this sort of random generation, right? And so that's been really fun. For a good friend of mine, Yana, we did these processing sketches way back when. This is all processing in GLSL. And when you feed this stuff into Comfy and have it re-render, it just creates this kind of like new, it's like Josh now is like a pro at Blender, and I don't even know what Blender is. I've never even installed it, which is amazing, right? It just brings this like 3D rendering quality to the work that I'm so super stoked about, which is cool. And if the work is glitched that gets inputted, then the output in Comfy gets glitched, which is super rad. I also think this is a really interesting collaboration tool. So this is Gemma O'Brien. She's a muralist, and she builds a lot of these big canvases and murals for people. And so we collaborated on how this could be a tool to help her collaborate. So she could input her work, which would then kind of generate these forms that she may then decide to redraw while she's building a mural. So this is sort of a reimagining of her work, and she may say like, oh, I like this splash, or I like this form, that maybe finds its way into one of these murals that she paints. So as a collaborative tool for Illustrator, I think there's a tremendous amount of potential using that particular tech to generate inspiration, which has been rad. I'm just going to breeze through this because I did a lot of collaborations with a lot of different people, people who do 3D. So this is PJ Richardson. This is some of his 3D stuff, and this is kind of like reimaginings of that 3D stuff inside of Comfy. So this is Comfy interpreting kind of my work and PJ's work, which has been super cool. Okay, so again, I might take this work that I've done in the past that looks like this, and I generate these compositions with programming, pass them into Comfy, and I get these kind of like contact sheets where it's a reimagining of this work that maybe is very flat. So it's been really fun to use that as a tool to go back over this 30 years worth of making content. Yeah. All right, let's get to the good stuff. I'm just going to blaze through this. The fun bit is that now it also round trips. So I could like work in processing, work in ComfyUI, generate some stuff, and then bring it back into processing. So this is me redrawing over the top of some AI stuff. So I'm trying to find these sort of exponential loops where I'm using programming and then Comfy and then back to programming, which has been fun. And listen, we all know every 3 days is like 3 years, right? Am I right? It's like you learn something and you're like, this is the best it's going to get. And then 3 days later, it's like, no, this is the best it's ever going to get. And then 3 days later, okay, now this is the best it's ever going to get. Like every 3 days is like 3 years. And we spent a little bit of time learning Flux and Flux context. Well, fuck Flux context because Qwen image came along. So it's insane how you spend a little bit of time kind of like learning new things. Flux, you were fun, but we're on to Qwen. I have done a crazy deep dive into using Qwen because I think it has so much potential, specifically Qwen image edit. And we could have the argument that, okay, well now Nano Banana has now trumped it, but it's not in Comfy. And now C Dream has kind of trumped it, but it's not in Comfy. So, right? So we're a little bit limited here. What is Qwen image edit? Man, it has been awesome in the sense that I can pass it photography and it almost becomes like a filter. So in the past I was using processing with GLSL, and that GLSL I was using like a filter where I would generate an image and GLSL would reinterpret something. And Qwen image edit has become this kind of like second pass where I'm able to do that, where I can take like an original photo or take something that I've generated and it becomes this kind of second pass with a filter applied. So, and I'm gonna show you a couple examples. In this one, I'm using a photo of my friend Celia, and then she's the only one that's in black and white up here in the upper left-hand corner. Every other version is Qwen image edit reinterpreting that photo, but with very specific instructions on how to make it look like a photocopy and make it black and white and change the lighting. And so every time I could run this, I would get a different output of Celia in a different kind of illuminated form, which has been wild. So that would mean that I could use my processing little thing in the upper left-hand corner, which gets sent in as an IP adapter, which then generates the image just to the right of it. And then all the rest are Qwen image edit reinterpreting that work as a filter. And I might be saying like make everything monochrome, but just keep her skin the same, or make it 32 pixel. Like it's been this really great way to reinterpret the work as sort of a second and third pass to get a bunch of different outputs from an original source. I can't even begin to tell you how good it is of here's a photograph, here's a product, put that product in the photograph and relight the entire scene. And so I had to put in this practical stuff because somebody in the back was going to be like, oh, he just talked artsy fartsy shit for like 30 minutes. I don't know how I'm going to use any of this. It's really great for putting trucks in different situations. So that's been super cool because now you can like relight all this stuff in a way that, I mean, I love how Adobe's just like, hey, we got this thing. And it's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. Qwen image edit just really, look, the truck doesn't even move. But it's just like, fucking, you want it in mountains now? We'll even relight it with different mountains. Qwen image edit has been super, super fun. You want a Jeep now? Okay, well, we got Jeeps. So Qwen image edit has been super dope for doing that kind of stuff. But back to the art stuff. Oh, we knew he was going to go back to the art stuff. So we've done this kind of thing, like how do I take like this 30 years of experience and how do I put it in Comfy, and then how do I use it to do me, to find kind of my voice. And so I'm going to tell you a little story. I was trying to figure out how to make something. And I'm the kind of guy where I typically don't plan, because if I plan is like a trip from A to B, and then I get to B and I'm like, cool, I'm at B, and I never wandered. I kind of like to start at A and then just walk and figure out where I go. And so I was going through testing again and using a bunch of custom things that I built and trying a bunch of different LoRa's and trying a bunch of different of my own programming inside of Comfy to generate something interesting. And I had a certain style that I was going to try to replicate. And so I start tinkering, and I'm tinkering, and I'm generating stuff that's pretty fun. And I get this top row, and I'm like, okay, cool, Josh likes science fiction. But Josh is from Colorado, and what if I just said, like, sci-fi Western? And all of a sudden, I'm telling this thing sci-fi western, and we start getting the stuff on the bottom, which I think is hilarious. It's like old cowboys and huge fuck-off robots. It's a win-win. It's a win-win. So I started figuring out this stuff. And through that tinkering, I was like trying to get a consistent style. Like, could I program Comfy in a way that sort of like embedded the essence of an artist or a cartoonist? And anytime I asked it to make something, it would always give me a lot of the same results. And then I started figuring out something really cool, which is, and this is super fun, and if you want to nerd out about this, we can go deep. You can actually generate an image 2 times. And if you generate the same image 2 times, you can apply a filter to the second one. And so here you're seeing a bunch of different filters applied to that second one. And that filter might have something like difference or hue or luminosity or all that kind of stuff. And then if you Gaussian blur it and then overlay it on top of your original image and put it as a transparency, you now get this level of detail on your top image that becomes like a color graded bit, because I'm generating the image 2 times and applying some kind of color thing, blurring it, and then applying it over the second thing. We can go nerdy about this, but I'll explain more. So when you do that, you can do this thing called color match, and then color match does this other weird thing, which is you can generate 2 images. You start with an original one. You start with a second copy. You then color match that to a completely different image. So on the left is just a blurred out image that's not even part of the original source, and then say, recolor that artwork based on this original thing, and then overlay the 2 on top of each other, and it goes fucking crazy, right? So now it means that I have a way that I can generate stuff, but color it and tint it a specific way, right? And it doesn't even necessarily need to be blurred. I can be passing it my processing sketches. So here I'm passing it a processing sketch, and it's recoloring that artwork based on all the color information that it finds in that original processing sketch. So how does that look? I'm going to break this down. So the upper left is the first image. Then I copy it and then flatten it a little bit, and then I recolor it, and then I blur it, then I overlay it on top of the original, but then I also generate a line art, and so then I am overlaying the blur, the line art, and then the next 2 is me doing a second and a third pass, where it's taking that as a latent and an IP adapter and just refining the quality of the work. So I can start with something that looks like that and get it to something that looks like that in the end, which has been crazy. So that means that I now have this way to take the same image and output it into all these different sort of filters. Can I get a hallelujah? Yeah, it's dope. It's dope. It's dope. I don't know what to tell you. It's fucking dope. I have not slept. A lot of Red Bull. Send help. So that means that I now have this way of generating this kind of style and coloring that's super unique to me, right? Like, I'm finding a way to put my own sort of artistic spin on this stuff. I love the rainbow shit. This stuff is so fun. So I went even further. Ready for this? It's going to get weird. You can embed an LLM inside of Comfy. So I said, what if I asked Comfy to make a graphic novel for me? So I set up a little script that I just said, hey, this is the only thing that I told it. I just said, hey, we're using Stable Diffusion, ComfyUI, and Flux to start. I'd like us to write a story. The setting is the distant future where massive machines and AI have overrun the planet. The genre is the fusion of science fiction and old cowboy western. The story follows 2 sisters embarking on an adventure. We'll find the details of their journey later, but for now I need a prompt that establishes our genre and our theme. The prompt should be vividly describe what the sisters are doing in the scene. Treat this like a comic book and much of a longer story. The prompt should not exceed 100 words. So now Comfy is fucking writing me a story. And every time it generates something, it'll generate like 500 images, and then I am God. I'm sitting up above going, well, you've done well. And it'll generate this stuff. So it generates all this stuff, and then all I do is I pick one of the images it generated, and then I ask it, what happens next? And so it says, okay, well, there's this sister, and she's a gunslinger, and this is what she's doing, and then her sister is this rogue engineer. This motherfucking thing is actually writing me a story, and all I'm doing is saying, what happens next? And this thing just keeps writing this story for me. So I found a way to not only generate this artwork, but I'm actually embedding an LLM, and an LLM is running a story. So at one point it said it was a video game, so it like decided like this is like, pick your character, so it generated all these characters and started generating all this stuff. So I'm literally letting ComfyUI write a story for me. And this is that idea of like, I don't know where the story is going to go, and I don't know if ComfyUI knows where the story is going to go, but I just keep asking it like, okay, what's going to happen next? And this is, I wanted to show this because this is what it'll do. So it's generated the story, but each time it's generating a unique panel every time. And so it's getting really hard for me to pick because they're both awesome. But it'll do this kind of thing where it'll pick these panels, it'll mask all these things into these layouts. The story is the same, but each composition is getting harder and harder to deem what's cool because it's doing such a great job. And then I'm almost at the done here, but I can use Qwen image edit to feedback loop this back in and say, hey, what would happen if this kind of filter was happening? So I can take one piece of artwork and keep mutating it into a way that's generating sort of kind of endless possibility. Man, I want to talk about this. This is where it gets really, really nerdy, and for some of you, you're going to be like, we're best friends. I'm a Linux guy, and not only am I a Linux guy, but I'm command line Linux, and there's nothing funnier than having an Ubuntu server that just runs command line and has a 4090 in it. Anyway, all my gamer friends hate me. They're like, wait, you've got a 4090 in a computer that's just command line? Yes. So I run Linux, so if you want to know how to run Linux, there's a way to run Linux where I have a box in my studio that is accessible to anybody on my network. So all of you could come over to my house, I could give you the IP address, and all of us could have access to this one box and talk to it. So it's been a really cool way to set up an environment where multiple people could work on this one box that's just sitting on the network. I use a sync thing to always back up my inputs and outputs. All my versions of Comfy write to the same folders. So most people don't know that if you do ComfyUI the hard way, not the easy way where you just download the app, you can download a version of Comfy and then you can set an inputs and outputs and a models folder outside, and your ComfyUI folder will go up and write all the inputs and outputs to that folder, and all your models sit in one folder. It doesn't have to be inside the ComfyUI folder. So down below, this is that little secret for starting ComfyUI as a listen 0.0.0 on port 8188, so you can make one box and multiple computers can access it. I said a lot of crazy shit. I'm so sorry. I love you. Thanks. Q&A. Whoa. Microphone's coming around. Whoa. Hi.
Hi. When you, okay, it was like watching this was just like a huge whirlwind, but when you started creating the story of the two girls, and you had to generate like the story, but you had this very long process of, generating the lines and then blurring it, yada, yada. Did it do that when it generated the subsequent story for you? Like, what was your process during that point?
Yeah, so at the very, very start of my workflow is huge. I should have taken a screenshot of it because it would make you cry. It's so many nodes, it's insane. But at the very start is the LLM that embeds the thing that I talk to. So I will paste that first prompt that I showed you, and then once it has that prompt gets piped into a workflow that's doing all that other stuff that I showed you, how to blur, create the line. So it knows that it's part of the process. So that's what I mean, that every time that thing generates, it's always going to give me a consistent style, because I've embedded that into my workflow. So it's doing that blurring, it's doing that color match, it's doing the comic book thing. And again, I'm killing myself that I didn't show that workflow. It's insane. It's a lot of nodes, but this is what happens when you've got a bunch of fake internet money and 2 years to play video games in ComfyUI. You build crazy shit.
And then it generates hundreds of those in
yeah,
that workflow.
So because it's a Linux server, I say, I want you to generate 500 images. I'm going to go to bed now. And I go to bed, and I wake up in the morning, and when I wake up in the morning, I have 500 images that look like that. And all of them are awesome. And this was kind of like the big complaint that I had with creative coding is that, 90% of the stuff that I would create would kind of be throwaway. It would be like okay, but not that great. And that was the point of my TED Talk. I said, in 2005, I said, there's going to come a point where generative design has this ability to use machine learning and generative adversarial networks to program the eye of the beholder. And so that every time I run, it's going to consistently pump out beautiful things. Because right now, when I'm creative coding, 90% of it's throwaway, 10%'s okay, 1 or 2 are fucking awesome. And if I were to fast forward to now and show you the stuff that I'm doing in Comfy, I'll have that thing generate 500 images, and when I wake up in the morning, it's almost impossible to pick one because they are all amazing. Because it's generating based on a pattern and aesthetic that I have sort of pre-programmed. And so now I got 500 images, and I don't know what to do with all of them. I could make like a 15,000 page book, and each page would just be like, holy shit, holy shit. It's pretty amazing. Hi.
First off, fucking amazing. Thank you so much for this presentation.
I blame Red Bull.
I'm curious to see if you've experimented a lot with vision models as well, and have you like come up with similar workflows, or have you just experimented with just sticking different video models at the end with different generations?
Video?
Yes.
Yeah,
like
so, I mean, there are some people who are really great at video. I tinkered with the Hunyun, am I saying that right? The Hunyun model for a while. WAN 2.2 is kind of the new one that I'm tinkering with. My biggest complaint is that Comfy is a little behind in terms of the quality that I would like. Like if you look at Runway, or if you look at VO, or you look at a lot of this other stuff that has like massive millions of dollars of investment and huge teams, they're producing a better video product than you currently can do in Comfy. I'm not trying to shoot my pistol here, but I'm going to keep looking at it, but my personal comment is that's just not good enough yet. So have I tinkered with it? Yes. Do I think it's that great? No. The WAN 2.2 is close though. Like the begin frame, end frame thing, have you guys played with that? Super dope, super fun. So that I like. But I think the open source and video community just needs to get a little bit more mature for me at the moment. Hi. How about over there? What's up?
I have a deep voice, so I can't speak loud. 2 questions. Do you write your own bash scripts? And 2, when you run these things, do you find it easier to bring in kind of existing plugins? I mean, because a lot of this is image processing, computer vision stuff, right? Do you find it easier to bring existing plugins that are maybe wasn't built for Comfy, or do you find it easier to just build your own?
Building my own.
Yeah.
Like right now, the thing that we have for processing, you can paste in P5.js, JavaScript. That's a custom Python node that then pipes out an image that gets passed in as a latent. So while I love Comfy and the custom node community is great, you also can make your own custom nodes relatively easily. And I've just been doing it from scratch, and I've heard that people are using Claude Code now to actually program their own custom nodes to kind of get to the things that you're trying to get to with relatively ease, because it's just Python. So while I think the custom node community is really great, there's also, like, I get frustrated. I'm like, oh, why doesn't it do this? And I just realized, like, oh, I could probably just program it in Python. So most of the time I'm building my own custom things, just because I know how to program. What up?
Hey, so I noticed with some of the collaborations that you did with other artists, which is really fascinating, like there's a quality of the output that looks a lot like it, but then it's sort of like kind of goes crazy and just adds like doubles of stuff. What are your thoughts around kind of, there's a certain restraint to the artistry of the original artist, and
yeah.
How do you get back to that with these generative outputs, if
So-
that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. So there's a bunch of different ways. So, okay, how do I talk about this? There's so many different ways. The first way is the clip vision part. So if you haven't looked at how clip vision works, clip vision basically looks at the content that's being passed in and tries to understand what it is for the generation. So that's why most of my prompts are blank. But I could guide it by passing in a prompt. So another thing that you can do inside of Comfy is pass it an image and ask it, I think Florence 2 is the good one, where you can say more detailed caption. I know there's also a Gemini one where you can pass it the image, the starting image that maybe you've generated, and ask it to generate a description. And if you were to pass that in as the prompt, it further reinforces the source material. I have deliberately not done that because I want it to fuck up. So I want it to kind of wander, and a lot of this has to do also with denoise. So the denoise factor becomes an interesting aspect where I can raise or lower the denoise so that it's adhering more to the original content that's inputted or wandering away from it. And you probably have guessed, I'm more of a wander away from it because I want to take that source work and have it look like the thing that was the original source, but also a deviation. And that's intentional. But if you wanted to get it to look more like the original source material, there's a lot of ways to affect that, especially with control net. So you understand this too. I think most people confuse control nets. I see a lot of workflows where people do depth, canny, and line art as all one thing, and they pipe it in, and I don't suggest that you do that. The reason why is if you just use depth, depth says mind the shapes, but you figure out the detail. The detail gets fucked up if you are asking it to do canny and line art because you're saying, here is the form of the shape, and oh, by the way, here's also a sketch of the shape. And so it has less to deviate off of the original source. So if you just pass in that original generation as a depth, then it says, well, I know what the position of things, but I don't know the detail of the things, and it will fill out the detail. And I do that intentionally. But you could, if you wanted it to look more like the original piece, you can certainly do that. I'm just not interested in that. There was somebody up here. Hey, you.
Hey, I was curious about the part where you mentioned that you generated the same image twice, but one had a different color. So I'm wondering if you could explain how you did that. Like, were you taking the original image and like converting it to canny or depth map and then re-rendering, or were you actually like running the whole pipeline from scratch to get a new image?
No. So and again, I can only show so much in a slide, and you know, I was like not trying to make this 3 hours. So I generate the image, okay, and then I pass that image off, and then I run a depth map on it. I can run a canny on it, and then I will re-render that image, but the secret is color match. And if you, like, I think with the custom nodes that I have in right now, my favorite is KGN nodes. KGN nodes also has getters and setters, which are really nice, where you can set variables and get variables. If you don't have KGN nodes, you're dead to me. KGN nodes is really good. They have an awesome color match and it asks for the original image and then a reference. So you pass in the original image and say, this is the original image that you're regenerating, but use this thing as a color reference. And so it's almost like a coloring book. So it's rebuilding that second image entirely new from scratch, but coloring it based on the secondary image that I'm passing in with color match. Then I'm blurring it, overlaying the two on top of each other, and I'm using like hue or saturation, and it's like an alpha 50% so that you're getting the original one. Then there's a second one that's been recolored, blurred, and and that's where, I don't know if, we can look at it later. That's why it kind of looks like gas, like rainbow gas is kind of like leaking out, is because I'm using that Gaussian blur of like 40 on that second image. But that second image absolutely is doing control net, regenerating with a color match. It's a cool trick. And then the line art thing is then the third layer. So it's like the original, the blurred recolored, and then the line art, and I sandwich all three of those on top of each other. The line art is a multiply because the line art is black with white. I invert and multiply. And then when it gets sandwiched, and then you say, cool, that's now the new latent and you pass that into another K sampler, it then will fix all the blurs and the lines to get that kind of content. You'll see like most of my ComfyUI stuff is usually like 4 passes in a K sampler. Yeah. And I'm using Stable Diffusion 1.5 for my upscaler. Fight me. The best upscaler, Stable Diffusion 1.5. No question. We can fight afterwards. So you saw those ones that were like super like detailed? Stable Diffusion 1.5 for detail and upscale. And that's usually my last pass. Hi, somebody over here? Yeah. Oh, same question? Oh. Yeah.
First of all, amazing work.
Thanks.
But my question is about upscaling. You
Yeah.
mentioned about diffusion. I'm new at ComfyUI.
Sure.
So I know that upscaling is a pretty tricky thing.
Yeah.
And when it comes
I'm
to
really
image-
good at it though.
Oh, I know. And that's, I need your secret sauce here because it seems like you kind of figured something out.
I have.
How big are you making it? Like, is it as big as you want it?
I can go 5x upscale
Wow. Okay.
with phenomenal quality that just blows kind of everything out of the water.
And-
And I'll tell you some of the tricks. The first thing is you take the image and you apply a brightness and saturation to it so that it pops.
Okay.
The second thing you do is send it to a JPEG compression node. The JPEG compression node removes all the noise and flattens it so that it looks like Flash, like it's all vector. And so if everything is all vector, okay, so the second pass is doing JPEG compression, which is going to remove all the little tiny dots, and it starts to look like a really shitty vector illustration. You then take that vector illustration and you use generate noise from image. So now it generates noise from the image, and you apply that over the top at 10% alpha. So now you've re-noised, but with really fine little tiny details. You then put it in a K sampler, 4 steps, CFG1, LCM. I know shit.
Well done.
And I can go 5x upscale, and the amount of details it creates is astronomical. Yeah, it's super good. I have secrets. Some of you people are using like SD upscaler. It's garbage, absolute garbage.
Last question. Here you go. You said, so these sound amazing and intricate, and I feel like they're worthy of some studying. You said sometimes you share your work, your workloads or your.
Yeah, sure.
Do you have a sort of central place that you do that, or is that
Discord.
Sort of random? Discord.
Yeah, I have a Discord channel, and we have a whole AI thing, and we're just sharing JSON files on that. So I think we're like 800 people at this point. So just come find me, and I'll give you my Discord.
Sounds good. Thanks.
That's where we share stuff. Next, yes, cool.
Let's give a warm round of applause for Josh. What an amazing presentation. So Josh was actually part of the founding team of ZeroSpace 1.0 back when this was a immersive art exhibit in Manhattan. So it's such a privilege to have him come and speak today, and feels like a bit of homecoming of sorts. So we have our next talk, which I'll be presenting alongside Derek Chan, who's one of the technical artists here at ZeroSpace. We're going to be talking a little bit about video generation and specifically how we can control it. So building off of some of what Josh was talking about, a lot of the problems around video generation are around how you can get control, consistency, and quality. And that's exactly what we've been exploring the past 3 months, 3 or 4 months now here at ZeroSpace. So I have some slides here. And Derek, if you want to join me on stage. All right, so back in May, we actually gave a version of this talk, and since then we've expanded. We have some new techniques, new models have come out. So I'm calling this Controllable Video Generation with 3D Engines, Part 2. But I will give a quick recap on the overall ideas and philosophy that we're approaching this from as well. This is our clout slide. I just put this up because I feel like we should. But just real quick, ZeroSpace, we are a video production, virtual production, motion capture. We do all kinds of emerging technologies. We worked with some of the biggest brands in the world. And I think what's unique about us is that we're both a production facility, and we also have an engineering team. So we get to R&D new workflows like this AI stuff, like real-time 3D, and test it out and actually use this in real productions, real internal projects, and figure this out, because otherwise it never really leaves like an artist's workstation and becomes realized and shown to clients. So that's where we're coming from. And we all know this, generative video has a control and consistency problem. If you ever use the commercial model, even the leading edge ones from Luma or Kling or VO, you're still doing this sort of prompt roulette thing where you're describing something with text or an image, and it's really hard, you know, if it's just text, like there's so little information in that text to actually translate to a moving frame. And if you're using a starting image, but then you want a very particular kind of camera motion or motion of a performer or an object inside the scene, that's also very hard to prompt for, and you end up just running generation after generation. So this is why we, as a team, have embraced open source, have embraced models like WAN 2.1, 2.2, alongside LoRa training and 3D engines. So we might not have control with AI out of the box, but there are decades of programs that already exist out there, specifically designed for artists to be able to do digital artworks. So we have Unreal, Blender, I mean, all kinds of animation packages, 3D modeling. And we're a real-time 3D studio. We use Unreal very heavily, and that's the tool we're using today and talking about today. But obviously, you can use Blender, you can use Unity, all kinds of other programs. All right, so a quick rundown of the 3 pillars we're going to talk about today. So I've put up some of the problems that you might face while generating video, and then sort of the 3 broad solution sort of areas that we've explored. The first of which is LoRa training, and that's what LoRa training gets you is character control and consistency, and style control and consistency. The second one is camera and performance control. So directing your camera, having a very intentional shot, intentional camera movement, and intentional performance the characters are doing. That's where 3D engines come in. That's where motion capture comes in. That's where a lot of the existing tooling plays into our favor. And the third one is breaking apart a lot of the stuff from the LoRa training and the 3D engines and compositing it together using a lot of masking tools. So this lets you take a background from one generation and then layer on a character pass from another generation. And across those 2 generations, you were using different LoRas, for example, right? So the model is tuned to produce different kinds of outputs. And then with the flexibility of just compositing and like blending stuff together, you can take the best of both. So you're not trying to get the model to do everything in one shot. Right, so the testing ground for a lot of this workflows and R&D was an internal short film called Night Fight. This is an animated 3D short film, and it's an internal project to develop our video generation capabilities. And we used motion capture to do all the animation for the film. So we did that. That was directed by Sammy, who's our motion capture director, and then brought into Unreal, and then used to create all the rest of the stuff you're going to see. All right, so I'm going to hand it off to Derek, who's been doing a lot of our R&D, and he'll talk about some of the nitty-gritty here.
Hi. Hey, everybody. I'm Derek. I'm a tech artist here at ZeroSpace, and I actually didn't know what Josh was going to talk about, but I felt like our talk and Josh's talk is actually a really, really great combo in context, because we use a lot of the same techniques and discovered a lot of the same kind of stuff. But Josh approached it from kind of like a artist, let's create cool shit point of view. Our POV is kind of like, let's try to use this in production, right? Let's try to bring this to real workflow productions and treat it less as a toy, right? Well, not a toy, like a really cool toy, but. So yeah, today I'll share with you some of the results and some of the learnings we've done over the past couple weeks in regards to the stuff we learned about how to integrate Gen AI into our existing 3D workflow. And more specifically, what we were trying to do during this R&D is try to ask the question how we can make Gen AI as consistent and controllable as possible. Because I feel if a tool you're using is not controllable, and if the artist that's using it can't kind of imagine what the result is when they press render, it's not production ready, and it shouldn't exist in a production workflow. So that's the question that we try to do. And as Shalong said, these are kind of 3 things that we discovered helped a lot during the past couple weeks. The lower data set tuning, using Unreal as a ground truth source to get source data and control passes. And thirdly, leveraging WAN's existing kind of ability to get temporal consistency in regards to masks and stencils, and incorporating that into our workflow. And lastly, since WAN 2.1 Vase is still like a relatively new model, we're going to discuss some of the limitations and quirks that we run into it. And you might be asking what all these pictures are. For this R&D project, we also decided to kind of do the hardest thing to do for a Gen AI project, which is we wanted to create a restyled render of a high-octane, fast-paced fight scene and render it out in a non-realistic, stylized aesthetic. And for those of you guys who've been using WAN and reading the WAN papers and stuff, you know that's kind of like not what it's great at and not what a lot of people uses it for. But I don't know. It's R&D, and what's the point of R&D if it's not like hard, right? So to visualize some of what Shalong just talked about too, this is kind of the overview of the pipeline. Right there is our glorious motion capture director, Sammy. And so, like Shalong said, to stage right, we first capture all human performance stuff using our Vicon system. We would retarget the animations, bring it into Unreal, put it onto our characters, like traditional stuff. And then using Unreal, we would render out all the control passes that we already need, and then do the final restylization in Comfy. For further context, Sammy is also a stunt choreographer and a awesome swordsman. So he recorded this sword fight mocap and retargeted that animation onto 2 knight characters. So that's and then our team kind of using this fight created a story around this fight and used that as our target, our kind of creative ground truth. And Elon, another person on our team, created a beautiful environment in Unreal that we used as the environment. So number 1 of how to create like a consistent and controllable result is using LoRa's, right? I'm going to assume that everybody knows what LoRa's are. So we have 2 characters, 2 knights in this in our short film, Silver Knight, Gold Knight. And the pictures next to them is kind of what we wanted them to look like in the final stylized result. So we trained a LoRa based on that ideal aesthetic. The team then kind of went around and using a series of closed and open AI models, created a synthetic data set, purely synthetic, of these 2 characters. I think we used Midjourney, we used Nano Banana, we used QuintImage, and we used Flux. All the good stuff. Just try to see how good of a data set we can get from AI models, right? Without actually sitting down and like creating the concept art ourselves. But already at this point, we ran into kind of like a hurdle, and it's a hurdle that a lot of AI generation stuff has, which is as we go through these images and as we look through all these all this data, maybe 80% of the images are good. Like the pose is good, the silhouette of the character is good, the background is good, but maybe like little details like the helmet is off. Maybe across 50 images, maybe like it has the knight wearing 7 different helmets. And if we train a LoRa with that data set, we're already starting from kind of like a bad starting point, right? We're already not being controllable, we're already not being consistent. So this is where, around this time, QuintImage Edit came out, and kind of like how Josh used it, we also found it very helpful in that what we did with QuintImage Edit was we first created a ground truth reference for the thing that isn't consistent across all our data sets. In this case, the helmet as an example. So we created So that helmet is kind of like, let's say that's the helmet we want the knight to wear all the time, right? We can use QuenImage to generate a multi-view of that helmet, and then use that. And this is like the cool iterative part of AI gen models inside this kind of type of production workflow. We then use that multi-view as reference and conditioning to kind of reprocess our synthetic data set one more time, like a separate pass, using traditional techniques such as in painting, such as control nets. So alongside new things that came out like SAM2 and grounding Dino, we can feed Comfy like an entire folder of our 50 images, tell it to segment out the knight's helmet, and automatically process everything on one click and automate it. And that's kind of the main goal of doing stuff in production, because things change and things change fast, and maybe the director suddenly has a great inspiration and needs stuff to change again. And this is when treating Gen AI inside production as a tool or as like a cool like thing to use kind of breaks down, right? Like that's when artists kind of go crazy and be like, what the fuck do you want me to do?
There's a little bit of extra context. So Derek just said using grounding Dino, and what grounding Dino is a model that identifies things in your frame. So if you prompt it for like, let's find the helmet because I'm having issues with consistent helmets across my images for my LoRa, it will point those out for you. It'll give you like a little box, like a bounding box around that helmet, and then you can tell QuenImage Edit to just fix the stuff inside that box without touching the rest of it. So if you're using like Nano Banana or some of these like commercial image editing models, what you do not get is a way to mask and tell the model to work specifically inside this area of the frame. And power of open source, we have all these toolings, so we can basically harness QuenImage Edit in a very like particular way. And then that lets us scale our pipelines. So what if we had 10 characters or 20 characters? What if we were working on multiple projects at a time? This is all about scaling it up.
Yep. And yeah, kind of this is the example. I think you guys can see. So yeah, this is kind of like a result. Imagine now there's like 50 of them, right? And the helmets all look good. And the cool thing about it is, like, let's say maybe some of the helmets didn't work that well. Then you can just, at that point, you could do the AI thing as like, let's run 10 times again because that's free. And maybe one of it's good. And it's less risky this time because they're only operating on the parts of the image that you don't like. So after this kind of character cleanup pass, we train a LoRa on it using one of the many available and really good LoRa training repos out there. I think we use AI Toolkit and Masubi Tuner for this one, but that's step one of having like a good, consistent result, right? Secondly is making sure we have consistent ground truth control data, right? And you know, Josh kind of talked about it too, and a lot of people here, I'm sure everyone's seen like the let's feed AI a bunch of control maps like the Blender to Unreal Depth canny shit, and we all know what it is. But during like our team kind of went on for this R&D was also thinking that it's only a matter of time before Unreal integration into Comfy becomes like a serious thing, because 3D is still such a good source of ground truth data. No reason to reinvent the wheel, right? So this is kind of like our V1 of making Unreal a customizable interface for something like a Comfy. So right here, it's just like an editor utility widget that can, you feed it all the characters in your scene that you want, and it'll generate like a good depth kind of estimate with some background offsets and shit. And then it'll create like a canny. You can create like a stencil mask of each character. And Sammy also created a rig for the open pose dude, and retargeted the same animation onto the knight. So this way we also have good, clean open pose data. And in Unreal 5.6, this is for you Unreal heads out there. In 5.6, Unreal came out with a really cool new feature called Movie Render Graph, which kind of unlocks and exposes a lot of the previous rendering automation stuff that was previously only achievable via like custom Python scripting into a node-based UI interface. So TLDR is this feature allows you to kind of customize all the outputs you want out of your scene. And in this graph, it's basically saying, I have 2 characters, 2 open poses each, and I want to render out the depth, canny, open pose, mask, everything, all that data we can use in Comfy with 1 click. And, you know, because the idea, like Sherlong said too, is scaling, right? And scaling and making things easy for the artist later on. So this is kind of like an example of the result you would see. It's 2 characters, and you would generate the depth, canny, et cetera, out of both characters, and then 1 batch for 1 character each. For reasons I'll talk about a bit later.
I'll like also go over which one's which. So the first one on the top left is a depth map. This just means that it's a render of the scene where things that are close to the camera are lighter colored and things that are further away from the camera are darker colored. And so this lets the AI understand the spatial relationships between different objects in your scene so that a character stands out, right? It's going to be light colored against a dark background, so it helps with that separation. On the top right, this is our open pose, which is basically like an animated skeleton. And when these video models are trained, they are trained with, like, for example, the vase model. It's trained with these sort of animation datas in mind. So you can input that later on, and then it'll follow this animation in the character that you end up generating. And the bottom left are 2 different masks, which will be used later on when we're talking about compositing and doing regional prompting.
Cool. And then lastly, just a quick comparison between the open pose and depth we can get out of Unreal versus the open pose and depth that you would get out of like a DW pose node in Comfy, or like a depth anything v2 out of Comfy. You can see that the DW, like, it's way more stable, right? It's way more stable, it's way more consistent. And the Unreal depth is cool because it's just a shader. And since it's a shader looking at ground truth 3D data, you can kind of tweak it in a way that you can't do that kind of stuff in Comfy. More flexibility.
Yeah, so depth anything and DW pose are basically like additional AI models that infer the pose of your scene and the depth map of your scene. But as you can see, there's like a bunch of issues. So that's the 2nd and 4th sort of clip that you see. And then the 1st and 3rd are straight out of Unreal. So these are ground truth level quality. This is like actually how the 3D scene looks. It's 100% accurate to our intentions.
Yeah, and before I go on to the last part, the regional part, this is like a quick demo of the consistency that we got from kind of the first 2 ingredients of this kind of like controllable, consistent problem. This was like a quick sort of, like a multicam kind of rendering thing I rendered out last night. The idea is that we have a wide shot and 2 close-ups, and we want the character in the background and the lighting and whatever to all be consistent throughout the entire edit, right? So with good enough LoRa's and good enough ground truth, you know, this is like a quick example of it. And this is also another example using kind of the same idea. And this one I rendered out like last week, and it was supposed to showcase some of the stuff that I thought was really hard with WAN when it first came out, which is number 1, fluid moving cameras and scenes with like cameras panning, moving fast, etc. And more, but also, and more like especially, shots where there's multiple characters that need to look a certain way, and then one character covers the other character during the shot, right? Like both these things, when I first started using WAN, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, how do I do this? And
just to reiterate, so what you see on the left side of each pair of clips is the final video generation, and on the right side is what's coming out of Unreal. So we essentially transformed like our Unreal animatic, right? Like this is like a cinematic rendered out of a game engine. That's not the final look, but has all the right elements. And then on the left side is like, this is the look that we're going for.
Yeah. And it's still not perfect, but way closer than I thought was possible, maybe like a couple months ago. So the thing that kind of ties it all together is something I kind of call the regional consistency problem, where let's take, for example, you want to restyle that Unreal render, right? And even in that Unreal render, you have your background, you have to restyle, and 2 characters that have to look a certain way that you want them to look, right? So already that's kind of like a conditioning nightmare, where you have a LoRa loader that you already have 3 LoRa's loaded, the background and 2 characters. But also, since you don't want to wait around forever, you have the Light 2X or the CosVid or the Fusion X shit loaded as well. So you have 5 LoRa's for this one scene. And if you just do it like this, you're going to get something that kind of looks like that, where it gets like the broad strokes of all your conditioning. Like, we have our 2 characters there, we have a tree in the background, and they kind of look like what our characters look like. And to kind of push the point even more home, let's say you have a shot that you want to restyle that's kind of non-traditional, right? Like in this shot, our character is walking into scene, and it's kind of and he's only kind of in part of the frame. And no matter how you prompt it with text or with like camera keywords, it's gonna look, depending on your LoRa too, how you trained it, it's gonna look something like that, kind of, which is not at all what you kind of are hoping for. So I also then kind of was reading and trying to find a way to fix this. And thanks to some people on Reddit, and thanks to reading the original Vase paper again, I feel like this was released with the original Vase, but I feel like it's not that much talked about in all the YouTube videos and all the online forums and stuff I see, is that Vase, alongside all the normal control map stuff that we know, is also trained to recognize this kind of mask/gray image overpaint combo, and that it kind of sees this. If you provide Vase that, it kind of sees it like, this is the area I want to keep temporally consistent, but in paint, you know? So what I mean is, if you're still using all the previous control map shit that we have, like the depth and the open pose, but we also have the masks and stencils of each of the characters rendered out before, right? So we take that, we put it on top of our base pass, and then we color it gray. And then using that, same prompt, same conditioning, same everything else, suddenly the results are looking a lot better, you know? Like, suddenly this is the thing that kind of ties all that shit together. This is results using the gray mask thing, and that's the results using the no gray mask conditioning thing. And if it applies to image, it will definitely apply to video as well. So with that in mind, we then kind of used that thought process and made a render pass with all the gray masks of our base stuff. And this is kind of, and it works, right? It's cool and it works, but it starts to come into one of the first WAN limits that we found. And that, at least from all the tests that I've been doing, maybe one of you guys know a better way, I can't find a way to get WAN Vase to do regional conditioning, and that in one render pass, you tell WAN, I want this LoRa here and that LoRa there. Like, I don't really know of a way to do that just yet. But in order to kind of circumvent that, we can kind of push it a bit further, kind of take longer, but we know it works, is to do a multi-pass render type of thing. So the first render would just be your base pass, which is just the camera movement from Unreal. And since we're using Unreal, and since we're using that rendering tool thing, we have this data. We have all this data laid out for us on one click. So first pass, we do the background. Second pass, we in-paint the character that we know is going to be in the background of this video, which is, in this case, the Silver Knight. And third pass is the Gold Knight that we know is going to be in the front, right? Smash that all together, and then we kind of get like a result that works with, like, it's like faux regional conditioning. You know, it's kind of faking this effect. And since that WAN thing is, the whole purpose of it is to have temporal consistency within the scene, if both of these characters were kind of in-painted on the same background, it has the same lighting applied to it. So you can just use the same mask and then just composite it on top of each other. And it works pretty, and it looks pretty, it composites pretty seamlessly. So that's one of the main things that we discovered. Second thing we discovered, which is like a second limitation of WANs, even to this day, is that it's the classic 81 frame rule, right? Like on consumer GPUs, WAN cannot generate a clip that's longer than 5 seconds. There's a lot of posts and a lot of people that have tried doing like, and it does work, tried this like video extension thing in which you kind of take the last 8 to 16 frames of your previous clip, feed that in as control data, and then you can generate like an extension that way. And it does work. However, due to I think how the VAE of WAN and maybe some of the LoRa stuff works too, if you do it that way, you will get a gradual quality degradation where the image slowly gets more and more contrasty, slowly gets more and more sharper, slowly gets blurrier. You can't, I mean, I guess you can kind of see it. Like from the top to the bottom, you can tell it looks a lot more, you know, like those nuked memes, you know, it kind of starts to look like that.
Deep fried.
Deep fried, not nuked. But one of the ways that we thought could be, one of the ways that that you can sort of circumnavigate it too, is if you crossfade stuff enough, plus color matching in between every crossfade step, you can kind of circumvent the color loss, but the contrasty and sharpness is still there. As you can see, well, hopefully the color shows. But yeah, left is no crossfade, no color match. Right is with crossfade and with color match. And with this, you can kind of, you can see that's a big difference between the two. But once again, it's still not perfect, and hopefully this is something they fix in newer releases.
You can see like the moment when the color shifts, if the GIF restarts. It's like right there. I don't know if anyone caught that, but if you're watching closely, there's just a little like contrast shift. Anyways.
And yeah, that's kind of most of the stuff that we wanted to share today. And some of the future explorations, I think it's like goes without saying, is when 2.2 Animate came out, and it kind of uses the same philosophy as the temporal masking thing, but it seems that Alibaba team, the WAN team, does think that this is kind of the way to go forward, which is sweet. Can't wait for WAN 2.2's official base to come out. That'd be exciting. But I mean, overall.
Yeah, I think some of the other stuff is just improvements to the ergonomics of this workflow. So right now we're round tripping between a lot of, I mean, not round tripping, but we're like exporting a lot of stuff, you know, from Unreal out to Comfy, and it would be great to have something that's like all sort of seamlessly talks to each other so that things from Unreal automatically get piped in without having to like, you know, render out all these like little tiny videos and then figure out how to pipe those in the right way into Comfy. So this leads to the larger point, which is like, okay, say we're going to do a 2-hour film with this, which would be quite an undertaking. There'd be a lot of work needed to orchestrate and automate this pipeline. So if there's a, you know, we have let's say like our 3D team or our animation team that's creating the animatics, something that can chop those up, get the right LoRa settings, get the right prompt settings, and then run that through a workflow, and then collect all that in the end, maybe like after an overnight run, and then show that to the director in the morning so that they can check off like, like this looks good, this needs to be rerun again because of XYZ issue, and just make it like sort of so that you're not juggling so many assets to get it rendered.
That's it.
Thank you. I also want to give a thank you to additional contributors to this work. So Jason Kende, who's in the audience today, has done a lot of amazing work. Raise your hand. Give him a warm round of applause. He's done a lot of amazing work optimizing our workflows and doing the orchestration. And then also Phil, who's based in LA. We would love to have him come talk at our next meetup. His handle is Machine Delusions, and he's done a lot of amazing work in the ComfyUI community as well. All right, it's time for a few questions. Yeah?
Yeah, any questions?
Is there a longer version of the two knights fighting? Because what we didn't get to see is it, because you're designing each of them separately,
Yeah.
and then putting them to back. And what we didn't get to see is like how are they actually interacting with each other. So like I'm just curious if there's a longer version of that video.
Hopefully soon.
Hmm.
It's like it's actively, we're trying to actively make it. We're still creating the LoRa's for, it's the two knights, and then we have like 2 more characters that we need to train LoRa's on and integrate in the scene. But hopefully once the workflow becomes fairly consistent, we can get everything, then like everything will be like, it's a matter of like regular production schedule, you know?
Final film would be like 90 seconds to 120 seconds, and it's a full like end-to-end story of two knights who fight, and then at a certain point they find out that they know each other from childhood, and they just find themselves on opposite sides of the battlefield.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. It's great. So my question is, so it looks like you were compositing the two knights separately, right, together with the backplate in a way. So if you weren't to do that, would ComfyUI just glitch out, or would it create artifacts? Is that what happens?
No, it'll work.
It
but
does work.
You'll get into the issue where like the classic AI issue where like, I guess those knights kind of look like the way I want, right? So that's the main reason that we split it up and did the compositing thing. It's because we want the characters of that mask to look exactly like how we want it. If you don't really care about what the knights look like and you just want to get like two dudes fighting, that's perfectly doable in one render pass.
Cool, thank you. Yeah.
Gotta have, a little sound effects with a good mic. Sorry about that, guys. Really cool stuff. I'm in contrast to what Josh was showing so there was a lot of vectors, scalability, high resolution. I didn't see high res within the within the studies that you're moving forward with. I'm just curious as to like maybe is there that space? As Josh said, he's not really feeling too much yet. It's not there yet, but I'm wondering with the the work that you're doing to get all of the pieces together how you want it, how much work is there yet to go to get the video aspect to a higher resolution space? I'm wondering what kind of timeline that might look like, either within your own studio or maybe within the industry itself.
Well, I mean, the traditional upscalers work with every model, like in Comfy, for example, the Ultimate SD upscale works with WAN, works with Flux, works with Quen. It's just once you start upscaling video, it takes so long. And for us right now, this is still kind of just like in the R&D, let's see if this works phase, that we purposely kind of worked within like a smaller resolution. But in theory, I don't see why not. Like if the base image looks good enough and has enough of that LoRa likeness that you want, upscaling it is just a matter of GPUs and compute time.
In addition, where, like when you're doing the mocap and things like that, when you're bringing in sort of like the models, and I don't want to say models, you're bringing in the images and the subject matter and such, are those pieces already at a certain resolution, and you're just kind of scaling back so that you can actually do the experimenting to get more fully close to what you want to get?
Yeah, like so let's start at the beginning. Mocap is just, well, think of it as just like a bunch of numbers on a spreadsheet that we're visualizing, and we convert that to motions that mimic human likeness. So there's no scale, there's no resolution on the mocap data. In terms of Unreal, you can render as high quality as your GPU allows. Like there's been cinematic game trailers, cinematic like little short films that uses Unreal that renders up to 8K. So the resolution bottleneck right now is definitely fully in the Comfy rendering front.
And WAN can currently generate up to 720p natively for WAN 2.1. WAN 2.2 supports 1080p native generation, which is super exciting, which is part of the reason why we're so eagerly anticipating VASE support so we can port these workflows over to a high resolution model. For this film, we're probably going to target like a 1080p or like 2K final output. So we'll do a little bit of upscaling, but it's not crazy. And the workflows to do upscaling are pretty well known at this point. So this is like relatively we feel more comfortable with this. So we feel that once we get this R&D right and we get the look right, the upscaling will be relatively achievable.
Hey, yeah, first of all, thanks for all the walkthrough. It was super helpful. I just had a question about the custom control net generator inside Unreal that you guys showed. How is that made out of? Like, is that like C++ and like a child blueprint or something, or it's like shader coding?
I eventually want to make it C++ if I have the time. But right now it's just cool. Right now it's just it's kind of stupid, to be honest, but it works. It's for I assume you know Unreal. It's for post-processing materials that using the movie render graph, you can assign, it's the same viewport every time, right? So on render, you can assign each single render that you do a deferred render like instance. And then in each instance, you can then select, like, for example, I want this instance to render depth. I want this instance to render canny. So it's a matter of just first writing the shader and then assigning that shader to the render output. This is kind of expensive though, and I don't like it because it is, for each shader you write, it is another instance that you're launching. So on my computer, like a 3090, I can't run more than 5 instances at once without crashing. That's why C++ would be a good fix for that, because you can pull scene capture data right away in the API. So that would be the next logical step to do it.
I see. Just one more follow-up question. Is this like packageable into like a plugin to like use in another computer or like another project?
I hope so, man. Like if I have the time, I'll do it. I think that is the ultimate goal though, because it'd be super useful. If you guys like the Stable Diffusion people who also use Unreal, you guys know there's a couple plugins back like 2 years ago that did this exact thing, but for SD. So it's called this is one made by this guy called Misfit, and it captures your Unreal viewport, and then you can type the prompt in the render queue thing, and then when you render it, instead of rendering the Unreal thing, it will pass it first through a Stable Diffusion image-to-image run, and that was really cool. So like and that was a plugin and definitely doable. And TBH, like Comfy can be a plugin for Unreal. You know, Unreal has like a native Python API as well.
Thanks.
Hey, I have a question about scaling. So you had to do all this like LoRa training just for this one scene. If you do another scene, do you have to replicate that training again in order to train that LoRa?
Yes and no, depending on the scene. This was something that like was really actually kind of eye-opening to me from Phil that Shalong just mentioned. Like if you have the resources for it, training a LoRa is not I thought it was like a crazy big deal to train a LoRa, but if you have the data and if you know what exactly your shot wants and what you want out of that shot, training a LoRa is like, you know, it's a couple hours on a GPU, right? So the example he gave was, let's say you have a very specific image of what your shot wants to look like, right? Whether it be like a camera move or whether it be like a specific character that shows up. He's done stuff like training a LoRa just for that shot. And as long as you get the result you want, like in normal production, that's kind of, like people do that already, right? People do custom rendering settings, people do custom like R&D passes for specific shots already, like VFX explosions and fluid and stuff. So in terms of, but like, you know, bringing it back to this R&D thingy we have here, the 2 nights are always going to be in the scene, so we don't need to. But we do have 2 more like kid characters that will need LoRa's too when they show up. So it really is like a shot-to-shot type of thing. But also, once again, like Phil said, depending on your film and depending on the thing you make, if we start to think of LoRa's as just like another asset we have, like you can start scaling your production in a way that I didn't really think about it in that way before, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just wondering about like the really painstaking helmet part where you had to go and make sure like the synthetic data set I meant for the helmets.
What about the helmet?
Would you have to do that again if you're going to do another data set for them?
Kinda. Like, let's say we have another. If it's another shot with this exact night, then no, then it's fine. We can just use the same LoRa. But if it's like the kid, and maybe the kid has to wear a certain type of tunic throughout the entire thing, then we probably would have to do that kind of cleanup pass again. But that's also the point of trying to make it like automatable, right? So it's kind of like we spend the least amount of time doing the shittiest parts of AI as possible.
Got it. Thanks.
All right. More questions? Okay, up here. All right, last question, and then you can find them afterwards.
You guys did such a good job, and I was here the first time that you guys showed the presentation, so it's really cool to see the progress. And I just wanted to give a little LoRa tip because I'm constantly trying to get a new LoRa of myself for different reasons, and I have a lot of tattoos, and that has been the bane of my existence, but I have gotten it right. Just do first frame, last frame videos, and like take the frames from that. Like, because you have 81 frames that you can use. So like if you can do that, you have so many different pictures that you can use, and it helps. And then I would say like Dream is probably the best to get like 4K pictures if you wanted to get like multiple pictures of the same thing if you're wanting to cut down on the LoRa training. Like, yeah, and maybe Nano Banana, but Dream for the 4K has been helping me a lot.
That's awesome. Thank you. But I mean, this is also, like the future is weird, man. Like all these data sets is starting to become like all synthetic. It's getting good enough to kind of get to that point. It's going to be a weird future.
All right. Thanks, guys, for this awesome walkthrough. Exciting to see the progress of this R&D project. Also looking forward to the next update. Okay, so thanks for all the speakers. It's been an amazing night. We have a little bit of time left. We usually have like a little community shout out section at the end. This is for anybody in the community who wants to share like a little bit of like a tiny little bit about the project they're working on, or if you're looking for collaborators, if you're looking for a job, if you're looking to hire, right? So the type of this is the forum to do that. So tonight, let's see if you so if you want to do a shout out, just come over here and line up, and then we'll go in order. Cool. All right, Eris.
Hey guys, I'm a traditional artist, and I've adopted AI in a lot of my creative works. And one of the things I found as I started to get deeper and deeper into this and started to make films with all of the different opportunities out there is that there's too many places to chase after. So I started joining Discords and newsletters and WhatsApp groups and just looking for everything, because I would miss so many things like film festival and deadlines, and then I'd find out that there was like places to learn I never heard of, and people have been using it for a year. And then I thought, well, how does someone fix this problem? And as the creative, I want to find ways to make money or collaborate or do things. And so I am now building a creative professional network that's specifically for Gen AI talents and those who want to find, hire, and collaborate with them. And I'm looking right now for the first 50 or so people to really like get in there with what I'm building and test it and tell me what it's missing, what's going well. So if you'd like to be a part of that, I would take your name and email, probably set my computer up here, and you can just talk to me after this, and I'd be glad to jam with you on film work, music, visual arts, blockchain, any of that stuff. Thanks. My name's Eris. Find me.
All right, thanks, Eris. Go find her if you want to be a part of a professional network for Gen AI art creativity. Anybody else have a shout out? Okay.
Coming
What's up, folks? My name's Aaron. I go by Spacecraft. That's my artist name. I've actually had the pleasure of actually doing live visuals for beat makers and music producers right here at ZeroSpace with a collective that I roll with called In Plain Sight. We do a monthly radio show, which the audio gets ported to Dublab out in LA, and then the audio-visual collaboration, of which I am the visualist for. That stuff goes to our YouTube. I'm a freelancer. I'm an urban artist. I'm born and raised in New York City, so I was raised on the trains as a graffiti writer. I'm fully immersed in the hip-hop aesthetic. I'm a typographer, custom typography. I'm a character artist. I have thousands of original characters that I've designed and created. And you know, I do a lot of things around those spaces, and I just wanted to put it out there. I'm freelancing. I was teaching generative AI at a high school for the last 2 years, but thanks to Trump's awesome budget cuts to education, that work is now, you know, the high school that I was working at in the Bronx, spearheading and really putting together my own curriculum and program. You know, I've got all of that stuff in the background, of course. We've done some really cool things with the young people in the Bronx. So I'm really proud of that, because we basically put New York City, the Bronx, and our youth on the map of international AI art. We're actually featured right now in the international AI art magazine called Creativa, that's based out of Spain, in their recent issue. I got 15 of my students on that platform as well. And as a result, I also had a lot of sponsorship. So Midjourney, if anyone knows, they actually have a hard copy physical magazine that they make. They don't sell it on newsstands or anything like that. They just, you know, they sell it directly. I have a couple copies if anybody wants some, because I got a shitload of them because they were sponsoring the work. Anyway, get with me if you want to, you know, do something. I'm always up to collaborations. Word.
All right, Aaron, right? Oh.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Spacecraft with a Z, SPAZECRAFT.
Right. Awesome, Spacecrafter. All right, Z.
Hey everyone, I'm Z, also known as Meta DJ. Wasn't going to come up, but then was inspired by the two individuals that just came up with those beats as well. I am a Metaverse DJ, Metaverse digital jockey, multi-sensory artist, curating experiences, bridging the physical and the digital. Actually, today I released a preview of my first album, fully AI generated, a year in the making. I call it Majestic Ascent, a portal into the metaverse. Music to me is the universal language. It can speak to all of us, whether our background, where we are from the world, what language we speak. It truly connects us, and I'm using it to bridge everyone in this community, the metaverse community, and the world beyond to see what's possible with technology. So came up here to, first of all, share to a room of 50 plus that I got an album out, and come up and I'll share with you guys. Think retro, future, techno paired with orchestral, paired with 8-bit music. It's like a video game taking on a wild ride right into the metaverse. And if you want to have an event that's like that, or anything in between, you want to showcase your art, whether it's in the metaverse. I've been in metaverse music festivals. I know a lot of great artists and DJs in the Web3 space, but also in physical or phygital spaces. Would love to work with you and showcase your art and use that universal language to attract people to be drawn into what you're creating and the story you're trying to share. Meta DJ, you can follow me at MetaDJAI or MetaDJ, and I'll rest my mic.
All right, go follow Meta DJ. Anybody else have a shout out? Okay, one more.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. I also wanted to introduce myself. My name is Brian Bishop. Just moved to New York. Fortunately, was invited to this event by a colleague and friend of mine. I'm William back there. Yeah, and I'm just wanted to say thank you very much for putting this together, and hoping and excited to continue to make community with you guys. Just want to say thank you, honestly.
Welcome, welcome. Welcome to the Big Apple. Any other shout outs we have? Okay, I have one shout out. I'm gonna wrap it up. I run a company called Daydream, and we do real-time video AI workflows, and we are an open source company. I'm hiring for a product marketer. So if you are a product marketer, if you know anybody who wants to work with me, come and chat with me afterwards. That's it.
Want to thank you again all for coming. Thank you so much to Eric for co-hosting and for LivePeer for sponsoring this event. We have more drinks and a little bit of time to mingle until around 9. After that, there is a neighborhood brewery that we love to go to called Threes. It's just 2 blocks away. So please enjoy the rest of your evening, and thank you again for coming.